Welcome to Session 07. Today we move from UI to API testing and tackle test data at the same time. You will write your first API test with proper assertions, understand why data isolation makes parallel runs safe, design a synthetic dataset with AI that covers boundaries without leaking real people, and test the contract, what the API must reject. The through line is that test data is a design decision, not a cleanup afterthought. Start with why API, not UI. API tests are typically faster, more stable, and easier to diagnose than UI tests. Business rules belong at the API or unit layer. They are tested closest to the code. The UI layer only needs to cover the critical integration flows, the end-to-end paths that prove the whole system connects. If you put business logic at the UI layer, the suite becomes slow, flaky, and hard to debug. The pyramid from Session 02 applies here. API is the middle layer, not the top. Here is the first API test. It posts to the user's endpoint with a unique email generated from the current timestamp, then asserts four things. The status is 201 created. The body matches the shape, email, and name are correct. The ID field is present and truthy. And a fourth, subtle assertion checks that the user was actually created, the side effect. Each test owns its own unique email. Run this test 10 times in parallel and it never collides. The timestamp suffix is the cheapest isolation mechanism there is. Every API assertion belongs to one of 5 layers. Transport, did the request arrive and what was the response time? Schema, are the required fields present and are their types correct? Business, do the values match the business rules? Side effect, was the data actually created, updated, or deleted? And security, are sensitive fields absent from the response? A status code alone proves only transport. A 201 with the wrong body still passes if you only check the status. Assert on all 5 layers. The metric that proves the data strategy works is this: 3 consecutive parallel runs, 0 email collisions, n unique users created, 0 test order dependency. That is the definition of isolation. Each test generates its own data with a unique suffix, cleans up after itself, and makes no assumptions about what ran before it. In a team of 10 engineers running the suite 100 times a day, isolation is not optional, it is what keeps CI trusted. 5 rules govern test data. Each test creates its own data. Names and emails carry a unique suffix, either random or the run ID, to avoid collisions. Cleanup happens via API or an own database fixture. Seeded data has a version and a known owner. And no test depends on a previous test having created a state. Break Rule 5 and you break parallel execution. Run the suite with 10 workers and a dependency silently breaks one of them. AI is useful for generating synthetic datasets that cover boundary values, locales, Unicode characters, and format combinations. But a dataset that looks real does not mean it holds the right statistical relationships or respects business constraints. Here is the safe prompt. Tell the model to generate 30 fully fictional records from this JSON schema, with no real names, emails, phone numbers, or addresses. Cover the listed partitions and boundary values. Add a _case field explaining each record's purpose. And check uniqueness and referential constraints before returning. For business data, verify PII directly. Quasi-identifiers can re-identify a person when combined, and masking is not the same as anonymous. Contract testing is the negative case. What must the API reject? Missing required fields, wrong data types, empty strings where numbers are required, strings that are too long, Unicode characters in numeric fields, duplicate submissions, requests without authorization, requests with expired tokens, and payloads with extra unexpected fields. Each of these should return a 400 bad request. If you only test the happy path, you leave an abuse surface that production traffic will eventually find. And never log the token or a full payload that contains sensitive data. The practice exercise delivers 3 artifacts. 5 CRUD API tests on a public demo, each creating their own data. A JSON boundary dataset generated by AI from the schema, with a self-validation checklist proving the data meets the partition and constraint requirements. And a data policy document, 1 page, stating what test data was used, what was generated by AI, and which data is prohibited from leaving the machine. The policy is the artifact that survives the audit. Session 07 gave you the API first argument, the 5-layer assertion model, the first test with unique data isolation, the 5 data strategy rules, the synthetic data prompt, and the contract negative cases. Session 08 layers and self-healing locators for UI tests and semantic visual testing, so your suite survives the next redesign without a human waking up at 3 a.m.